Kevin, from your perspective, what makes the customized learning implementation at Harrisburg High School different than the industrial age or traditional classrooms?
You know, there's many characteristics, and some of those are hard to quantify. We do really believe that we may have been doing kind of a disservice in the traditional classroom by doing so much leading. We'd really like the students to own their learning, so I think that's the real basic difference. It replicates a little bit what the one-room schoolhouses were as well, because so much collaboration, has to be so much collegiality, and then, you know, students learning on their own, having to make some mistakes, but in a real safe setting making those mistakes. So again, I think there's a million characteristics, but basically I think it's that owning of learning, which is a real difference than the traditional style has been.
Why is that difference important to you?
Well, you know, when I hand the diploma, it's always been a little bit of unease in the back of my mind that perhaps I didn't give them everything they could get. And we have a wonderful setting. We have terrific people, experts, who have been through all the courses where we know the theory and the philosophy. If that becomes reality, kids walk out of here with every tool they could possibly need to be able to compete in life. And I think our system is the best in the civilization of the world, but I think we can take it to a new level. And because of the ever-changing society out there, we really have to give them more tools and skills rather than just content knowledge. So that's very important to us. We want them to be independent of us, and I think that the system gets them to a higher degree of that.
You've come a long ways in the last year and a half in terms of implementation, but what was that starting point, or what was the ramping in for Harrisburg, for the high school here?
It was really the rewriting of the mission. The first year that I had the good fortune of having this position, we rewrote the mission. And the mission was about independent learning, and then all that meant to every one of the teachers and each subject area. And we were finding, as I was evaluating whether we were getting to that place, that it wasn't happening. That within the confines of the time, within the confines of the pedagogy that goes with that time, we weren't able to get there. So really the impetus was that. And then we've always had, and you know, something that's close to my heart is special education. I think it's special education, the changes that happened back in the 70s changed us forever. That we needed to treat kids as individuals that all had strengths and weaknesses, and try to approach those in the best way. So we couldn't get to that either. So a systems change, I think, was in order to try to write an IEP for every kid, and then to also dynamically change things that would meet our mission.
What's the biggest challenge or obstacle that you've experienced as you've gotten started with customized learning?
Change. You know, you're taking a 120-year-old system and trashing it, and that's you know, that's something that really causes great distress amongst families and students and staff members. You know, everybody. You're shocking things that they don't like to have shocked. You know, my saying always is that there are three real personal things. Your faith is one of those things, and certainly education is something we all share in this country. And so when you're making a change of that, when it's led to successful things for people in their lives, that's difficult. So just the change has been hard. And then the deeper understanding and comprehension then of what this can mean, and having the patience and perseverance to get to that place, that's always difficult. You know, we're a fast food society. You know, we'd like it to happen right now. And unfortunately, in education, we know that even some of the residual benefits aren't shown until they've graduated and went on to life. So it's hard to quantify that, hard to prove it, but I think the change has been good, and we are seeing some good results.
So, based on what's going on here, how have the roles of teachers and learners changed?
Well, I think the teachers have become professionals again. You know, they have an office. First of all, that change, even in their environment, I think has made them feel more worth. You know, I think when you speak to teachers who are involved in this, they tell you they would never go back because they feel like the intimate relationships between them and the students has increased tenfold, and because of that, they feel like they really make an influence and have worth every day. I don't know what kind of gifts you can give to teachers, especially in a state such as ours with low compensation, but I think that kind of professionalism, that kind of self-worth is very important and significant. For the students, they have more burden. They simply have more burden. And then the mastery is something that has changed their lives. They have to get to a level where that skill mastery is useful to them later. They can no longer get the D- and move on. And so that's a huge change, and that's of course a continual practice and an over and over kind of thing, which is difficult for students, but that's the role they have to take, and that's a great role for them for life too.
You've answered this in part, but more specifically, what was the initial reaction of teachers to this kind of a change?
Well, I don't think anybody disagrees with the IEP for every kid. I don't think anybody disagrees with our mission. The way to get there is sometimes difficult for them maybe to completely grasp. We have fortunately here had basically almost every teacher who has volunteered to be a part of this. They can see the worth. They are willing to bite that off, even though it's exhausting. But they're willing to go that route. So I think that their change and their distress is the same as everyone else's. That it's something different. I'm going to have to make some different ideas in my life that I've never had before. So I think all of those have been tough.
You've already pointed us then toward the reaction of everyone, but as you think about now, not teachers, but parents and students, how would you characterize the reaction of parents and students to the customized approach?
Well, I think our parents who have really taken the time to investigate it are incredible advocates for it and very supportive. The details are the difficulties. As we are growing and evolving, we continually try to find ways that, first of all, communicate very well where their kids are at, because it's certainly a different system of addressing that communication. Rather than infinite campus and you got 70%, it's about growth towards an end to a course. That's a complete different way of looking at things. So we've had to continually look for ways to put it into context so that students and teachers can understand, are you really making the grade? Are you really having pace that'll get you to an end? Can you get to graduation, for instance? So those have been really difficult ideas again, but we listen to them. I had over 100 parent meetings last year and 15 different forums with people in the community, and every time I think I grew in my understanding of what I needed to do to make sure it could be just as good as it could be. Unfortunately, the class of 2017 has always had to be on the edge. Our sophomores this year are right on the edge of every new thing that we come up with. And so I appreciate them. I'm very proud of them and their parents for being able to take that on and kind of roll with the punches and go, in the end, this is going to be the best for our children. So that's great, but we just keep getting better and better at it. But it takes the whole community, and every time somebody gives me a suggestion, it changes me just a little bit and changes our teachers then in how we go about doing our business.
I appreciate the fact that you approach this as a continuous improvement process, but as you think about the fact that you have a year and a half invested, what evidence would you offer that the customized approach is impacting learners and learning positively?
As I mentioned at the outset, some of those are really unquantifiable. I think that the students are more accountable, much more responsible, do own the burden more of their own learning, so a lot of metacognition. Those are really hard to quantify, and I don't think I'll be able to see those and prove those for a time being. We did some data. I'm not sure it's entirely credible because we had no baseline, obviously, but comparisons that we could make with their 8th grade years, their 7th grade years, better GPAs, which is not the norm for students coming from middle school to high school. Normally the GPA takes somewhat of a dip just because of the difficulty in the change. Behaviors. Right now, 14 weeks into this semester, I've had one behavior from Mod CL students. Now, we've had little things that I wouldn't consider behaviors, but one time I've seen one student for a behavior, and it was actually on the bus. I think that these kids are so engaged that they don't have time, first of all, sometimes for behavior, and I think they're just growing up. I think they're maturing in quite some way. Plus, teachers and students are around each other all the time. So we've created an atmosphere that's more about the work in the academia than it is about some of the other things that go on, even though we still do cherish the social part of this. So, and then the other thing is attendance. Our attendance in South Dakota is so high, it's hard to see improvement, but we did have improvement last year in our freshman class of about 3 percentage points. And in particular, long-term absences decreased incredibly. Now again, I don't know how credible that is because 4 or 5 students can really skew that data. But so we did have some decent data. It's just I need a longer period of time. We did surveys on the students. We did them 3 times last year on the freshmen. We will do them again coming up, the same survey. I'll compare those data. The trends that we were seeing in that data, though, were things like, I understand this is good for me, I just don't like it very much. I would say that was the theme. So I think that's great, that's kind of music to our ears as educators, that when there's a little bit of distress about the work we're applying, and yet they know that it's going to be good for them, we can get over those humps. So not a lot of data, again, because of the lack of a baseline, and we do it a little bit differently than others do in the country. Hard for us to make great comparisons, but we'll continue to gather that. So hopefully the class of 2017 will really show us what we've been able to do and what the improvements have shown.
As you think about where you're at in the journey, what do you see as the next step in the implementation effort?
It was interesting. I was just talking to a student today. A senior project of one of my students is analyzing the mod, and it's interesting. Last year we had 4 or 5 students who did that in a research class for us. And my preference, of course, would be that I really believe in this so that all students could take part in this. Right now, one of the difficulties is there's a little bit of a divide in perception amongst my staff and amongst the community that maybe the kids that are higher achievers are the mod students. The kids that are not go in the traditional setting. The teachers who are the best are the mod teachers. The teachers who are not. It's completely an unintended circumstance, obviously, and we've talked about it. There's a conscious level of it between the kids and the staff, but it's something I need to quash because that's not the case at all. We're trying to do our best for all students no matter their setting. But I would wish, that at some point our community accepts this completely and our school is completely within this kind of idea, because I think I'm fairly certain and confident that this is the best for all kids, no matter what their achievement level, motivation levels, demographic. I think it's good for everybody. So right now it's great to have a choice. It assists us in some ways of implementation, but I think in the end Harrisburg High School needs to be a complete Mod CL school, and we're also building our next edition for Mod CL. It could be used for traditional, but we're making certain that it fits what our teachers and our students will need.
Based on your experience of the last year and a half, and knowing that you have the opportunity to influence lots of others in terms of principal colleagues across the state and region, what advice would you have for another leader in terms of initiating this kind of approach?
Well, what they all tell me is you guys go ahead and then you provide the templates and the curriculum and everything else, which we're more than happy to do, by the way, because we'd like to influence as many schools with any good things that we could have as we could. But, I think you really have to have the community and the staff, of course, going down the same railroad track. If they're not, that can really provide a drag on the gravity of what can possibly be. So I think that's number one. And, I think that you do that by having a mission that's alive, and then really using that mission as the basis for your evaluation of what's going on in your school in all ways. And then you take a look and say, you know what, we can't get to this mission. We can't get to these aspirations without some sort of change. I think that the technology that is afforded to all of us in South Dakota and across the country, I don't think we've used it well. This gives you that chance. So there's another affirmation of, hey, we're going to use this in the appropriate way now, when we haven't used it maybe to the depth that we could, and we're seeing that in our kids and our staff. The collegiality and the professionalism that the teachers get, all they would need to do is send a cadre of teachers and shadow our teachers for a day, see the time they get to spend with each other, bouncing ideas off each other, and then, even the commiseration of Wednesdays here, which is our ACI day, those sort of things don't happen. We're in silos in our classrooms. Certainly we're the kings and queens of those classrooms, and maybe that control is good, but the way our teachers get to come together and work together is so powerful. that I think that anybody who visits here really has a wonderful appetite and says, boy, I'd like to work in that kind of environment and situation. I would say, though, you can't in any way downplay or you have to let teachers, students, and community know that this is much harder. This is incredibly harder. This is real life. If you're going to go into this, you have to understand that it's a lot of extra time. It's curriculum writing as well as being a teacher, as well as being a counselor all the time. It's kids in your face all the time. It's turning around assignments every day because that has to happen to get to a level of mastery. It is incredibly harder. Our state, fortunately, our community in particular, welcomes that. They embrace the fact that it's going to be harder, and like lifting weights, you lift to fatigue, and that's when you get better. And that's what these kids and these staff and these community members do. So it is difficult. It is an incredibly difficult path, way higher expectations than probably we've ever had for students. But in the end, that hard work always has great rewards. So I think that there's a wonderful light at the end of that tunnel, but you have to know that this is going to be difficult. The last thing I would say is, in our guidebook, we've written the principles of why we did this. And it's easy to lose sight of the philosophy in the reality of the day-to-day. I think you have to continually revisit that, or you will lose what your vision and focus is. You have to continually go back to the philosophy, and even though it might sound like a broken record, you have to continually hit that. That is so important, that there is an end in sight and it's philosophically based. But that's not easy either, because more people want to just talk about, hey, I don't know what my grade is. Why do I have to get to mastery? Why do I have to turn this back in? Why are our kids doing 7 hours of homework on a Friday? They want to talk about all those things, not what the end result is going to be. So you have to keep going to that, and you have to stick with it. That's difficult. It'd be easy to relent and go a different way.
You've had loads of interactions with community members, parents, students, teachers. And so as you reflect on that, what is an experience or an anecdote from this implementation process that was particularly meaningful or impactful for you?
There are actually so many places where there were forks in the road where something made us go one way or we went one way. But I would say there's two things. One was last year, the 9 teachers and the other 2 auxiliary staff who were a part of this had to report to the board. And I can say, again, with complete confidence, other than family things and faith things, this was the most poignant moment I've ever had in education, and without kids being around. I mean, those teachers collectively made such a case and such a supporting message to the board. It was incredible. And, I had asked them prior, do you want me to be there? I mean, I can leave so you can feel comfortable speaking freely. No, stay here, and right down the line, each one of them spoke with such passion about how they would never go back. And, one of their sayings at that time was, well, if you get rid of this, you might keep 40 teachers, but you're going to lose 9 because we're out. We're not staying unless you maintain this. Then the second thing would be, I had 2 sophomores come in early in the year, wanted to talk to me about maybe some changes we could make. But at the end of the conversation, they said, you know what? We're just glad that we're the first class. We can't wait to walk across the stage in 2017, and we're the ones who led the way. And that's, another one of those great affirming moments of that the students really understand what they're getting, why they're doing it, and in the end, how great it's going to be for them and how they feel so proud of being those people. So, a small group of people making a great difference, and that's what they think all the time. And so that keeps them going too. So those 2 moments, I think, in the last year and a half, and there's hundreds every day to tell you the truth, but those 2 moments in the last year and a half have been fantastic.
Last thing I think I would ask you is that obviously you've engendered lots of support for initiating this and keeping it going. As this principal, speak some to the involvement, the support in terms of superintendent and Board of Education.
Yeah. It took a while to move our superintendent to where he's at now. Now he's invested in more ways than one, so we're lucky that way. He's a visionary. He sees, even though he's an old school teacher, and some of the things we do up there still drive him crazy when you're not in control of every moment of every day. But he sees the value, and he listened. We sat around tables with people who probably had some difficulties understanding where we were going, and he's continually been supportive. I think he understands too that there are some things we can't quantify that these kids are going to get that he's still very comfortable with. Our school board has been completely unanimous. If they had their way, they likely would have forced the issue. Unfortunately, in our district, we don't have open enrollment, and for a gravitation and a migration of kids out because of this idea would have been financially a little disastrous for us. So we had to give a choice last year of either, and that's been fine. We haven't lost a student now because of this idea, and last year we probably lost 4 or 5. So those were important things. Our board has been completely and utterly infatuated. They came 3 weeks ago and walked around. One of the board members was here all day. When she left, she said, "I want to go back to high school." So we have had complete support from the board in all ways, and the board has changed. Since we began, we have 3 new members, and yet they all have continued to provide great advocacy for us. The community, there's been some tension, there's been some contentiousness. Sometimes it's misinterpreted. There's lots of other issues out here in our state with Common Core, with standards, with testing, with all those other things. In some ways, that's been a blessing because we've kind of flown under the radar in some ways, and it's been locale rather than a larger issue. I hope it's a big issue. I hope it becomes a big issue in our state. I hope more people take this on and it does become an issue. I think our community en masse would be a community that would go out and speak positively about it. Again, the day-to-day details are hard, just like they are for every parent. When your student comes home and they've got a perception about what's happening, and it's just harder, and they're crying on the weekend because it just seems like there's no end to the things they have to get done. We do have more checks on our kids than probably anybody else does. Weekly, we're telling them whether they're on pace, whether they're getting to pace, or whether they're insufficient. And when a parent sees that, they see that as an F. And that changes the whole dynamic, and that's advanced kids down to kids who might struggle. So those communications, we have to soften those a little bit and make sure they understand they've got till the end of the course and they can go at their own pace, and those are just alien concepts. So it's our community, again, I'm so proud to be a part of a community that thinks into the future, and that whenever we have discussions, and generally when I meet with parents, it's an hour, we usually walk away all shaking our head that this is a good thing. There might be some details I still need to look at and change for their particular student, but we walk away knowing that in the end, this is going to be good for them. They're going to have the tools to compete in the society, whatever that might look like when they walk out. So, you've seen the bond issues here in our district. I mean, there's 75%. We have people who understand there's just necessities. I hope they start seeing Mod CL as a necessity, something they would never go back on, something they feel like prepares their students better than any other school. We've got a ways to go to get there, but right now we have good support from those community members. And then that choice of them also being able to go to the comfort traditional route, that took away some of that contentiousness because they do have a choice. So we're lucky. I've said this many times to my colleagues and anybody else I speak to. I live in a pretty utopian world, a pretty Pollyannish existence, because we have lots of resources, we have great support, we have kids who come from a demographic that have advantages. So on the other side of that, then, I think it would be negligent on our part not to give them whatever the most contemporary and best idea for pedagogy could be. I really believe this is it. It's 30 years for me in education, one way or another. This is the idea, I think, that can best serve our kids right now. And I think it's not supported by some Mod CL research, but it is supported by all the other educational research, all the other underpinnings. So we're really fortunate, and you know, again, the last constituency, the last population, our staff are like back in the candy store. Whether they're 3 years in or 15 years in, they feel new. They feel enlivened. They're tired, but they feel like this is really making a difference. And that's you know, as a person who is their kind of boss, man, that's wonderful to see. It's wonderful to see that energy and enthusiasm.